Hello everyone, welcome back to Paul's Messy Bench Models. And today I've got a real action-packed episode for you. This is an entry video for a group build and a double tooltip video. Stay tuned. So James Tester over at Scale Model Experiment channel is hosting a group build of the Tamiya Mercedes AMG GT3. He also hosts a Facebook group called Strictly Box Stock Model Cars, and people are posting their progress on the group build on that site, so you should go check it out. So I've gotten a few steps into this kit, and I'm having a lot of fun with it. Like most Tamiya kits, it really doesn't present a lot of problems, and assembly goes pretty quickly. I've got the chassis together. I've taped a piece of foam to the bottom just so I don't scrape the paint off the bottom. You're really not missing much on the bottom. There's really no detail in there. So the philosophy of the Strictly Box Stock Model Car group is basically to do the best you can with what comes in the box, with what the manufacturer gives you, and not feel obligated to spend a lot of money on aftermarket parts or do extravagant amounts of scratch building, to basically get a good clean build out of what comes in the box. And these Tamiya kits are kind of ideal for that approach. They usually don't have an engine, so you don't have to feel guilty about not putting ignition wiring. And the areas that you can see are fairly well detailed right out of the box. There's really no need to go to town. Maybe one shortcoming of this Tamiya kit is that it gives you decals for the seat belts, and the instructions want you to apply them right to the seat, and I really don't like the look of that. You know, once you do that, they look like something just stuck to the seat. They don't have any third dimension to them. So what I did is I just left the decals on the paper, and I cut out the paper and then went along the edge with a little dark gray paint, just so the white paper doesn't show anymore, and I glued that into the seat. And you know, maybe it's not quite as realistic as aftermarket photo etch, but it's not bad, and the windows are small, so I think that's a totally adequate result. The engineering of the body is really very impressive. There are a lot of little parts that come together. There's the main body, the front and rear bumpers, and the backing for all these inlets and ducts are all separate pieces, but they come together really well without major gaps or steps. A little bit of filling and sanding, and you're good to go in no time. So the subject of filling and sanding gets us to the tooltip segment of this episode. And like I said, I got a double tooltip for you. So there are a couple of spots on this car where Tamiya just couldn't mold the whole thing all in one piece. So you get another piece to insert from the inside, and that leaves a little seam around here, and oops, another one down there, another one at the edge of this ductwork here. Not bad gaps by any means, but still noticeable and not there on the real car. So I'll show you how I filled them in. So for filling in seams, there's probably a few products you already know about. There's things like Tamiya putty, which is a solvent-based putty. It actually dissolves into the plastic a little bit, so you get a really good bond with this stuff. One of the drawbacks is that it tends to shrink, and the thicker the layer you put on, the more it shrinks and the longer it takes to stop shrinking. For little seams on this car that are pretty small, that's probably not going to be an issue. But if you need to do a big job, this has some drawbacks. There's also acrylic-based putties, which they dry faster. They still shrink a little bit, but they tend to dry faster and they're less toxic. They don't stink as much. They don't bond as well to the plastic, though, and if you try to wet sand them, it just makes a smeary mess. A lot of people use superglue for filling gaps, and this has the advantage of it bonds well to the surface, and once it's set, it doesn't shrink anymore. You won't get a ghost seam showing up, days or weeks or months later like you might with a solvent-based putty. The problem with using straight superglue, especially if you use an accelerator, is that the longer it sits, the harder it gets. And at some point, it's going to be so much harder than the plastic that filing and sanding usually removes the plastic faster than the superglue, and you can wind up chasing your tail. Recently, what I've been using to fill gaps is a mix of superglue and talc. And talc is basically just a mineral additive that you can get a lifetime supply on Amazon. Talc is pretty commonly used in, cosmetics and chemistry, and it's a filler that can be mixed in with epoxies or all kinds of stuff. And the advantage is that the talc is inert. It doesn't kick off the superglue, so you still have a good amount of working time. But the superglue is still going to harden up a lot faster than a solvent-based or water-based putty. So you can get to work sooner. Another thing is that the talc, it's pretty soft. So normally when superglue's been sitting around for a couple of days, it gets really hard and brittle. Here I've got some talc and superglue that I mixed together a couple of days ago. And you can still kind of carve it. It doesn't really get as hard as really old superglue does. So you can sand it and carve it and file it even days later. Pretty easy to mix up. Drop or two of superglue. And about an equal amount of powder. And just mix it together. And you get kind of a soupy mix, but it'll be goopy enough that it won't flow, so you don't have to worry about it running away from the area where you put it like you might with regular superglue. And in a few minutes, it'll harden up enough to carve and sand. One thing to keep in mind when you're mixing your talc and your super glue. If you're squeezing the bottle into the talc and you let go, you could accidentally suck talc up into the bottle because it's dusty. It can blow around. And as you're squeezing the bottle, if there's air in it, you might blow the talc around. So it's probably better to put glue first and then the talc. So on to part 2 of the tool tip. Once you have your seams filled in these weird concave recessed areas, how do you clean them up? Well, get yourself some forceps, which you can get at places like Harbor Freight. Hardware stores sometimes have these in like a bargain bucket by the front door. Sometimes hobby shops have them. But you get your wet dry sandpaper and you wrap it around, usually a cylinder shape. There's a chunk of toothpick cut off in there, and this one has a chunk of styrene tubing inside, and you just trap it inside the sandpaper. So once you have your little gizmo put together, you dip it into water, and now you have a tool that will sand in these concave curves without disintegrating. Well, that's all I've got for you for now. There is no time limit on the Tamiya Mercedes group build, so go get one and go play. And we'll talk to you later. Have fun out there. Bye.